Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
There's been a lot of focus in the gaming industry around acquisitions ever since Microsoft's recent big mega purchase of Activision Blizzard for almost $70 billion. I myself still can't get over that. Sony fired back with the announcement that they're scooping up Bungie soon after. There's been talk from insiders that more acquisitions are coming, as well as from the heads of these actual companies themselves saying more are coming. So there's been a lot of speculation over which gaming companies may also get acquired. People discussing who they'd like to see go where, what would be the best fit. Fanboys obviously arguing over why their company is doing the bestest, as well as some concern. I keep raising this whenever we talk about these acquisitions, that it's probably not good to see the industry get effectively smaller as these massive companies get brought under the umbrella of even more massive ones. But there is one company that it seems like many are rooting for it to get bought out, and pretty much by anyone. Like, many people feel things can't get much worse when it comes to this company's game output, how they're handling their IPs, and that's Konami. They've seemingly been pretty uninterested in doing any big quality new releases. They've done, I'll be honest, they've put out some decent collections lately with their past classic games, which admittedly is pretty basic. I mean, it's not the hardest thing in the world to just bundle a bunch of retro games together and release them, but let's be honest, they're doing better classic content preservation than Nintendo. Granted, that's pretty much every company. I mean, nobody is nearly as bad as Nintendo when it comes to preserving their classic games. But yeah, when it comes to like newer releases, they've been much more interested in their pachinko and other gambling machines. I know they handle some of like the Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, but those killer franchises they've got, Castlevania, Metal Gear, Silent Hill, etc., they're all just sitting there, rotting. So yeah, while I'm not someone who necessarily roots for these acquisitions in general, this is one I would definitely root for. Now, if we want to talk about the current state of Konami, they've actually had a pretty big start to 2022, I'll be honest with you. They kicked it off by dissolving 3 of their game production divisions, which was shocking because no one knew they had 3 production divisions to dissolve. Like, what have these people been doing? And Konami released a statement soon after that announcement to reaffirm that they are still committed to video games. It was clarified that there are production departments that still exist. I mean, imagine things being that bad at any other company in the gaming industry, that you need to clarify that you still have production companies making games. We promise, guys. I know it looks like we're doing literally nothing in the games department, but I swear it's not true. No news to announce about any, of course, Metal Gear, Castlevania, Silent Hill games, etc., though. It's like, just how is this even real? Now, something they seemingly are much more committed to is using these properties to shill NFTs. They've already had this big Castlevania-themed NFT auction that I mentioned in my recent video about Atari's new NFT loot boxes. I think the grand total was like 160,000, something like that. And their actual take after the fees was around like 150,000. So if you're wondering what Konami's soul is worth, what the reputation of one of the greatest, most influential franchises in gaming, I mean, from the NES with all those Castlevania, Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES, Rondo of Blood, The King, Symphony of the Night. I mean, this was a franchise that in the era of console wars was iconic on both Sony and Nintendo systems. So selling out all that history is worth about $150K to Konami. I mean, Jesus Christ, guys, if things are that bad, you should have called me. I could have lent you a couple bucks. And if you think that's bad, things are about to get worse, as Konami reaffirmed a couple days ago that they are committed to producing more NFTs in the future. When they had their recent quarterly earnings report and talked about, I think it was in like the digital sales section, they mentioned specifically, for the future, we will also be selling non-fungible tokens, NFTs, in an effort to preserve content that has been loved by our consumers as commemorative art. So yeah, I mean, how could you not just want somebody to save Konami from themselves at this point? I mean, it's so bad. So when you talk about potential companies to acquire them, I think the one that makes the most sense for most people is obviously Sony. I think that's who people would prefer, if anyone, to buy this company. It would make a lot of sense given the history of a lot of their bigger IPs. I don't think anyone would mind seeing Sony grab them and immediately making that phone call to Kojima to finally get Silent Hills made. I mean, the Silent Hills story with the PT demo and how Konami basically tried to scrub it from existence is one of the great stories in gaming, and people clearly still really want that game to happen. I mean, all you have to do is look at that whole Abandoned debacle. You know, people got it in their heads that this Abandoned game was one of Kojima's like secret projects. Even though the company denied it, they certainly, I'll admit, they certainly gave off some teases that made it seem like it could be Silent Hills related. But yeah, it's clear people would love for that game to actually happen. And I think even if Konami themselves wanted to make a new Silent Hill game, I doubt they could even do that game. I mean, certainly they couldn't get Kojima because there was all that drama over his departure from the company, them banning him from like the Game Awards and stuff like that. So I think to do it right, to even give fans the game they would want, you'd have to probably sell it to somebody else. Not to mention, speaking of Kojima, the way they took a shit on his legacy with the games they did make. I mean, Kojima does all those Metal Gear Solid games, pretty much all classics. And as soon as they kick him out, it's like, oh, we don't need Kojima anymore to guide this franchise. And they produce Metal Gear Survive, which was like, if you're not familiar, a zombie, like, horde defense type game, just like fighting waves and waves of zombies. Oh, just thinking about it makes me cringe. You almost wonder, like, with all that drama, if that game was just made to spite Kojima. I mean, I think that makes more sense to me than anyone actually thinking this was going to be a successful game. Making Metal Gear without Kojima at this point is bad enough, but, you know, making this game that was just Metal Gear in name only, what a joke. And I would agree that Sony probably makes the most sense, but, you know, I would say, I think Nintendo would be a good fit too. And I'll say, to someone like me, having Castlevania and Metroid under the same roof would be akin to them like buying Sega and getting Sonic and Mario together. Sure, it's not on that level, and it's not like these were necessarily rivals, but these were the franchises that literally defined a genre, Metroidvania. And I think, like we just saw with Dread coming out and being a success, Nintendo would be the most likely to give us like a classic style Castlevania with a AAA treatment. Like if this company went to Sony, I think we'd be more likely to get a Lords of Shadows type deal with Castlevania, which could be cool, don't get me wrong, but I think when we talk about, you know, keeping those classic style of games alive, I think Nintendo is the best fit. Speaking of, don't forget Bomberman. I mean, you want to talk about an IP that would be a perfect fit for Nintendo. I don't think you could do much better than Bomberman. This is a character or franchise I think, in the hands of Nintendo, could really be elevated and like revitalized. And even with some of this other stuff, you know, I know people think of Nintendo like, you know, they're the kiddie company. They wouldn't be able to have Silent Hill. It's like, dude, this is the home of Fatal Frame, you know, a very similar franchise. Bayonetta as well, the game that nobody else even wanted. Yeah, I mean, Microsoft and Sony fanboys got butthurt when Bayonetta 2 was an exclusive to Wii U, and it's like, literally, that's because your overlords didn't want this game. We would not have a Bayonetta franchise if it wasn't for Nintendo. You've got a Metal Gear game that's still a Nintendo exclusive. Twin Snakes. I know it's not everybody's favorite because it takes some liberties, but I'd still, you know, I'd really like to see an HD re-release of that. Maybe this is how we get it. But yeah, I wouldn't discount Nintendo. I think that would be a good home for these franchises. And another thing, you know, I would want you to think about stuff like Metal Gear, stuff that's more realistic when we talk about these acquisitions. One of the things I keep hearing from people why they wouldn't want Nintendo to acquire anyone is because like the Switch would hold the franchises back. I'd note if they did purchase any of these companies, you probably wouldn't get a game designed from start to finish for Nintendo until their next system anyway, which will certainly, even if they stick with the Switch format, it's going to be a lot more powerful. In terms of Microsoft, I know there's the whole weirdness with Japanese companies in the US, plus Xbox not being the most popular thing in Japan. But on top of that, I think Microsoft has they've eaten enough for now. They should chill out. Like literally for their own sake, because they're already, I know, drawing the eyes of regulators after, you know, just scooping up Activision, Blizzard, and Bethesda, both those juggernauts in pretty rapid succession. But the point remains, honestly, I wish anyone would buy this company, because I don't see how, in terms of a game's perspective, yeah, if you like pachinko machines and NFTs, you think things are going great, but from a real game's perspective, how could things be any worse? How could anyone else neglect franchises worse than Castlevania and Silent Hill? How could you mistreat them worse than Metal Gear Survive? Like, do you think any other company could even come up with more of a cheap cash grab than Metal Gear Survive? Because I don't think so. And I'd also note, before I close, there can be some nuance with this deal. I mean, look at the Sony deal with Bungie, how they're going to be like an independent kind of studio still. They're going to be able to like self-publish and stuff. You could definitely work out a deal where Konami keeps the rights to use these IPs to make, you know, the pachinko machines and stuff like that, and, you know, another company, a Sony and Nintendo, gets the rights to make actual video games with them. You might want to put a stop to this NFT stuff, though, because even if you like NFTs, I think it's just a bad PR move right now. I mean, you look at that Castlevania auction, 150 grand seems like a lot of money, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's like a drop in the bucket. I don't think it's worth the backlash, even if you don't care about like the scamminess, the environmental impacts, all that crap. I still don't even think it's worth it for the most part. And given again the fact that it just doesn't look like Konami is very interested at all in making great new games, I don't think it'd be that hard of a deal to work out. But yeah, anyway, with that, this video's a wrap. You know, if there is one company that I would like to see acquired in the gaming space, it would be Konami. Let me know your thoughts on the potential of Konami getting bought out in the comments. Would you like to see this company and their IPs run by someone else? Where would you like to see them go? As always, I'm the Shy Guy, Johnny Zakari, and thanks for watching.